Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato.
Hey everybody, I'm Eat Ears. No. This video format is familiar, right? I think it's missing something, like one of those like sensory stimulation videos in the top right, so you don't lose your attention span. Yeah, just like that. Anyways, this video by Rick Beato, I have opinions on it, cause it's not very good. This'll be fun. This'll be great.
We're going to try something new today. This video is on the history of the music business and technology.
You know what? That's a cool topic for a video. I'm sure like a seasoned like industry veteran like Rick Beato would have a lot of cool history and facts to share about that, right? I'm sure he knows what he's talking about, right?
Music is too easy to make. Frank Sinatra used to get up in front of an orchestra and sing a vocal take, and they had one microphone. And they would get it balanced just right. Frank would say, okay, I'm ready to do it, and he'd sing.
Right, so it's a history lesson. The 1940s, 1950s, Frank Sinatra records all of his stuff in one take. He's a very talented singer. You know, that's how it went back then. Okay, Rick Beato, that's cool.
Then you get into the 1960s or so, and then you have things where you have multi-track machines. You could go in if you had a mistake in a vocal part or any instrument, and you do a punch-in. Oh, I don't like that word. I sang it out of tune, or I want to change this lyric. You go in and you just punch in, fix the line, punch out.
Right, so the history lesson continues. The 60s brought along new innovations in music technology, and we got tape recorders that you could use to overdub new things, like fix mistakes in your recordings and stuff. That's great. I sure wonder what kind of new innovations happened in like the 70s and the 80s. That's so interesting. I want to learn more.
Fast forward to 1998.
Wait, what?
Cher, the Believe song.
What?
They invented this thing, auto-tune. I've talked about this a minute. That would go into these DAWs, digital audio workstations. So you'd have something like Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton.
I think you missed quite a bunch of steps there. I think quite a lot happened in between tape recorders of overdub and literally the invention of digital audio workstations. Like mixing on drums changed a lot in the 70s. In the 80s, you started getting mixing with more like reverb and compression, all these digital effects. Where's that, Rick Beato? Why did you skip all of that? Maybe this isn't a history lesson like I assumed it was. But yeah, it's just auto-tune ranting again. That's kind of the thing he's known for. He does not like auto-tune.
Well, T-Pain and people like that.
Oh, people like that. Okay, that is certainly a choice of words there.
Realized if you put it on a really hard tuning, it would make it sound like a keyboard. And that's what they did in the Believe song.
Okay, that weird-ass comment aside, okay, autotune is used now to make vocals sound better, and some people use that as an effect. And that's, most people watching this probably know I use autotune a lot to make my voice sound different. That's fine. Let's see what else he has to say.
Well, then the same thing starts happening with drum parts. Guys playing a drum part, and you're like, you know what? This would be a great take of this first verse if this one hi-hat wasn't a little drag. Well, let's move it back a little bit, or let's move it forward, whatever.
Okay, so he is saying that the same thing started happening to drums, but to be very pedantic here, pitch correction and drum quantization are two different things. Duh. But I get it. The sentiment's the same. It's about fixing mistakes after you've recorded them.
Here's an example of a quantized drum part.
It's something I'm going to cut out because I don't want to get copyright striked. Basically, he takes his drum loop from another song and plays it with quantization and without quantization, except the unquantized version already has swing to it. Like, it's triplets, but there's also just generally swing applied on top of those triplets. So the quantization automatically removes that because it's set at 0% swing. So this is not an accurate example of quantization because it's automatically going to make it sound worse because it's also removing the swing and you're not adding it back in your DAW. So what gives?
Once you've quantized the drum part, it's a drum machine. It's just like Superior Drums.
No, it's not. It's obviously very different. So these like drum instruments use like a big library of samples, and there are going to be like different hits that it's going to randomly pick between to like simulate the variances between each drum hit if you played a real drum set. Even then, there's still going to be very similar sounds in there that you cannot replicate unless you are using like an original drum recording. just because you've quantized it doesn't mean those variances aren't there anymore. This is not comparable. I know that because I use stuff like this in my DAW all the time.
Everyone started quantizing their drums because the budgets to hire session guys went away, but you typically have these crappy drummers that you'd have to fix their parts, and once you fix their parts, you start moving the bass around, you start moving the guitars around, and then you pretty much have sterile, generic, quantized rock music.
Like, okay, it's clearly not a history lesson anymore. It's becoming a think piece on lazy musicianship instead. Rick is describing this slippery slope of all these artists who they don't have budget to do real music, so they just quantize everything, and then everything else, all the bass gets quantized. Everything's bad now. Oh, I want to go back to my Beatles, who were real musicians. Except it's just like, have you ever touched a DAW in like the past 10 years? Like, I can go on like Google right now and just Google how to humanize drums, and there will be tons of tutorials on how to achieve this in your DAW or on your drum machine, because people do realize that humanized drums add a lot of character to songs, even to electronic music, even to pop music, everything really. And that's why, gear manufacturers have been adding those features to their kit too, and to DAWs and stuff. Like, this is a thing. He's kind of just pretending that nobody does this or that everyone quantizes everything, when that's just like, that's not even true. But then after that, the video descends even further into just straight up musical elitism.
The other thing that people realize is that it's really difficult and time consuming to record a drum set. You need a studio and a lot of gear. But to get a professional drum sound, you tend to mic up the different instruments. I got 2 mics on the bass drum, I got a mic on this tom, mic on that tom. It's hard to record it well.
No, Rick, it's mostly expensive to record it well. Most musicians don't have the money to have that much kit. Like, you're just flexing that you own a lot of mics, but like, okay, what can you do with that? You make good music with it? Like some of my new tracks use recordings by one of my drummer friends, and they just record everything on a single stereo sound recorder, like the same one I use actually for this take. That's not a professional setup at all, but you can make it work if you try hard enough. It's not lazy. It's like, in fact, I think it requires more work to make it sound good in a mix. It requires more effort. It requires more supporting instruments to fill out the gaps that you're not really getting with that recording. There's a craft to that, Rick.
You have a great ear. You got to know how to tune them. You got to know.
Right, so working with real drums and mixing them and recording them properly is a craft. Okay.
Now, some of you are out there thinking, what are you talking about, Rick?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need to have a good sounding room. You can have a crappy sounding room. You don't even need good mics, because you're going to just replace everything with samples.
No, actually, I don't think that at all. I think it's totally fine to work with a bad recording and make it sound polished and good, and up to whatever your capacities are as a producer. But even with that, like, some musical innovations were just born out of music that sounded fucking terrible. Like, literally all of punk music, for instance. Distortion was, like, discovered because someone stabbed their amp and there was, like, a hole in it and it started distorting the sound. This is, like, how a lot of rock music was shaped. It's very weird to just suggest that you need like the best kit ever to make rock music. That's like totally not the case. Sometimes we work with the instruments that we have out of necessity. It's not like we're too lazy to get a recording setup. It's just like that's the only thing we have. So what do you want me to do? Buy a $2,000 drum kit and $3,000 mics? I don't have the money for that. Do I just not get to make music now?
It's difficult to get a good guitar sound. You have to have a good sounding amp. You have to have good sounding speakers, good microphones.
You gotta have enough money to afford all of that shit.
Most people now just use amp modelers. They plug into their computer, they pull up their program, everything is done for them. They've already been pre-mic'd, pre-selected. They're all using the same algorithms. They can create great sounds. They're so easy to use. Doesn't take any skill at all.
I think it's starting to become very apparent that Rick Beato doesn't have a single clue what bedroom producers actually do. There's a skill in and of itself in tweaking your amp simulators and stuff until it sounds good. Like I'm not a professional guitarist at all, and I had to spend quite a while fine-tuning and tweaking Trash 2, for instance, to make it sound passable with my guitar playing. I might not have the same skills as a traditional guitarist in that sense, but that doesn't mean this takes no skill. It's just a different profession, really.
It doesn't take any creativity either.
Like, at this point, you're just making up a guy in your head to get angry at, because most people I know have a lot of knowledge of how to use VST plugins and stuff. That takes a lot of creativity. Like, trust me, it really does.
Then, of course, you have the MIDI packs that you can buy.
Oh no, Rick Beato looked up the Unison chord pack and thought, Yeah, that's definitely what producers are buying because they're lazy. They're totally spending way too much money on that. Yeah, of course. That's totally what's happening, right? I think he really tends to think of these like laptop producers who press one button and then they create a song, but like no. And sure, like MIDI chord progression packs and stuff, those exist, but they're just chords. You still need to have at least some form of like learned or internalized sense of music theory in order to be able to use them properly, because you still gotta layer bass onto them and a lead onto them and stuff like that. If anything, those chord progression packs are just a shortcut for people who already know how to do this stuff to just speed up their workflow. And that doesn't mean they don't have skill. That's a completely different thing.
Huh, what is this? What is this?
In the early 2000s, labels stopped signing rock bands, essentially. It was far easier to sign artists that could make their own music using a laptop and a microphone.
I honestly disagree with this. This might be his experience as someone in the industry, of course, but like, as what you'd consider a laptop musician, it is difficult to get in the industry. A lot of bands start out playing like local gigs in their local music circuit, and that's how they get picked up by fans and labels and whatnot. But as a laptop artist, that is a lot more difficult. Like me with my weird hyperpop shit that I play on a laptop with a synth and an audio interface, that is, how do you market that to people? How do you get shows for that? For a lot of these styles, besides rock music, there aren't really any circuits to go to. So it's actually a lot harder. So I don't think I agree on this with him at all. But yeah, as demonstrated, the previous parts of the video are mostly just like to set the stage of like what he considers all these tools that are making rock music worse. But then you get to the part where he gives his opinions on.
Why is this a bad thing? Well, let's start with the creative dependency on technology limits the ability of people to innovate, I believe. Could be wrong about that.
Yeah,
maybe it helps.
Yeah, maybe you're wrong about that,
so,
Rick. So we all know that limitations inspire creativity. That's probably what Rick is getting at here, and that is a take I agree with. Like, yeah, going back to the basics, going back to just playing guitar, drums, etc. There's a good chance you'll get more inspired by doing that. But I feel like all of this hinges on an assumption that technology cannot be limited. It's always this big box with all the sounds you'll ever need. A lot of electronic music genres like house or techno or jungle were born out of those limitations. I'm literally a tracker musician. I have my custom gaming rig, which I built in 2022, which can do everything I need, and I use it to run software that composes music that is compatible with a computer from the late 80s. And you could argue, like, yeah, you can build a full track with, like, 4 monophonic sample channels in Pro Tracker, but, like, even if you do consider Pro Tracker like a band-in-the-box sort of software, it still has limitations, and you still have to work around them, and it's still very inspiring, even if it was very advanced technology at the time.
The homogenization of music. The over-reliance on similar tools, as I just brought up, people just following trends of using certain types of sounds. This is why these trap beats have been in vogue for the last 20 years. People they know they work, so they just keep using them all the time.
Yes, Rick, that is called a music genre. Yay! Oftentimes people will use the same sounds because those sounds have the same historical or social or political context, and people unite over that. And that's why I find it particularly painful that he's describing a black music genre like trap here. Like, I don't have a lot of knowledge on, like, the history of hip-hop and trap music, but trap specifically, I do know it uses a lot of 808 sounds, which, you know, came from, like, early house and techno, which was invented by a lot of black folks because they picked up, like, the role of the 808 drum machine because it was cheap at the time because nobody else wanted it. It was a genre that was absolutely born and innovated on out of necessity, and he's just, like, ranting about it here. Like, it's so contradictory. I don't get it.
Quality versus quantity. The easier production makes the process go faster, which creates an oversaturation of music, making it harder to find really exceptional things.
Like, I do think he has kind of a point here. It is a lot easier to make music because computers are more widespread, music production software is more widespread. Just generally, music production has been democratized a lot over the past couple of decades, which is a good thing. What I take issue with is that this fact of music democratization is being put in the context of lazy musicianship, which is weird. It's not musicians' fault that it's easier to make music, it's just the general advancement of technology and also the music distribution landscape changing drastically and switching over to streaming, where we get all these distribution services that anyone can upload their work to. But that's not the fault of the musicians, that's just how it goes, that's just how things developed. Except the next part makes his whole opinion of his even weirder.
This is Spotify's way of using AI. They have AI songs, they attribute them to people that don't exist, and this allows them to take royalties that that would go to musicians and keep them for themselves.
Right, so we're getting an anti-AI tangent, which I would normally agree with, except it's being put in a video about lazy musicianship, which doesn't sit right with me. He spends a couple of minutes just ranting about generative AI, which I am also against, but it's also right after a section about how he thinks Spotify is being pumped full of lazy slop that all uses the same mixing presets and everything. So what you could gather from that is that he thinks AI music is all going to sound the same because it's using the same pool of songs as its training data, and then lazy musicians are somehow contributing to making it worse, which is a weird take if that's what he means. Like, he wants to, like, blame the little guy, the small independent artist who is too lazy to get a real drum kit or something like that, when actually he should be blaming these music executives of these big record companies even more because they are the ones pushing this bullshit onto artists like us. But then he just caps the section off with the following.
This reminds me of the best AI critique I've seen. Creative AI tools can be seen as sophisticated plagiarism software, as they cannot produce genuinely original content, but rather emulate and modify existing works by artists subtly enough to circumvent copyright laws. Well, what's funny about that is that was actually written by ChatGPT.
What does this mean? Like, he just went on this tangent about how AI is bad, which of course it is, but then he shows this, and am I supposed to think AI is actually good at generating this stuff? Am I supposed to think it's, like, being self-aware about its motivations? Is AI actually capable of generating the stuff we want out of it if we prompt it right? Like, what is this trying to say? I have no idea what his intention is with this bit at the end. I think it's just to sound smart, but it falls flat because I don't know what the fuck it means.
Act 2. Music is too easy to consume.
The thing that's kind of bad about it is that at night, I always have to go to the bathroom.
Right, so it's like a faucet analogy for, like, how streaming platforms work, which... Then this happens.
But imagine this.
Wait, so now he's just using generative AI images? I'm sorry, what?
You can turn it on, you can turn it off, but what's going on?
Yeah, what is going on with, like, all the flexing in this video? Like, why do you need to show off your fancy-ass faucet? I bet your mother's very proud.
In the stream of water is all of the music that's on these platforms. Now imagine this is one artist's entire output. This dropper is each of their songs. Eventually, you exhaust their whole catalog. When I hit this and I start the stream, the music has very little importance.
Like, yeah, I don't think that's a terrible analogy. It's just like, yeah, there's a stream of music you take from it, and it only becomes important to you when you're, like, you know, drinking the music or, like, listening to it in that case. That's not a terrible analogy, okay. And he does suggest that, like, yeah, some music gets lost in that process if you're not, like, taking it from the stream.
It goes from the faucet, down the drain, out to the sewer.
Okay, sure, but then what is with this dramatic zoom shot of, like, a water processing plant and, like, this dramatic sound effect in the background? Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, the imagery here is that, you know, he's using water, which is a vital source of human life. Like, we need that to survive. It's important to us. It has meaning. So then if you throw all that stuff back into the sewer, into the water processing plant, it's, like, very unceremonious. Except he also just spent a whole section talking about how much slop there is inside of that stream, like the water's filthy or something. So, like, what? I don't really get what it means. Why is it so dramatic?
Except in this case, the music is not recycled like it is through the sewer. There were 100,000 new songs added every day in 2023 to streaming platforms. That's more than one song per second for the entire year. By comparison, when I was a kid,
back in my day,
if I wanted to buy this Led Zeppelin II record, I had to get a job or borrow money from my parents to buy it. I paid $8 for brand new. With the money that I made, you actually had to expend energy riding your bike or walking to your job.
I had to walk uphill to the record store to buy a record with my own dollars and then walk uphill back home to listen to it. Like, I guess we're just going to pretend that global access to music of all parts of the world is like a bad development and it's not actually very helpful to a lot of people around the world. Like, okay, sure.
Listening to it a bunch of times, going over to your friend's house, sharing it with them. When a kid opens Spotify and clicks on a song, they can just skip to the next one if they don't like it.
There is a very weird argument here, which is that kids these days are, like, not likely to share music with their friends, and that's, like, killing the industry. It's not being appreciative of artists and how much work it takes to make music. Which is very weird considering every single kid these days has a portable media player that's connected to the internet in their pockets at all times. That's not to mention that social media has made it so much easier to discover new music and share it with your friends, because now you don't even need to go to your friend's house and listen to their vinyl records. You can just send someone a link and they can listen to it wherever they are, on like whatever audio gear they prefer. That's better, actually, for music discoverability.
All of the music that exists, or at least it's been uploaded to Spotify or Apple Music, is available for $10.99 a month. I'm talking about all of...
I do find it interesting how he mostly tries to name a lot of classic artists here. Like, he names your Eminem and stuff like that too, but it's mostly a lot of old folks. Like, I think the general sentiment here is that, like, oh, these old musicians who made actual full albums, their works aren't being appreciated anymore because now they have to, like, be on streaming for, like, a low price, and it's not fair anymore.
All of that, $10.99 a month, for the price of what we used to pay for one album.
Hey, you know what? Streaming platforms that refuse to pay their artists a living wage while exploiting their content for profit, that is a huge issue. We should talk about that. I wonder what you have to say about that, Rick Beato.
Which is why music is not as valued by young people. There is no sweat equity put into obtaining it.
Oh, no.
Having it be part of your collection. Having it be part of your identity of who you are. These are the bands I believe in. These are the artists that I love.
Dude, I don't even know what to say to you about that. Have you ever heard of the concept of, like, a stan? You mentioned Eminem in that previous section. You would probably know what a stan is. Or like Swifties or something. Like, there's so many fans of music these days. And all this new technology has made them even more vocal about it, too, because they're everywhere on social media.
And I'm going to share it with my friends. I'm going to bring that record to school. I'm going to play it for my friends after school. We're all hanging out, reading the back cover of it and seeing who played on it.
This all hinges on the assumption that no kids are doing this anymore, which is wrong. Like, there's so many good albums I've discovered through friends of mine talking about it on social media or like Discord or having listening sessions with me, and that also has inspired my own works and the things that I stand for. To suggest that that's not happening anymore is just wrong. Like, he does have a point about the back covers of albums just, like, they're not being on streaming services and stuff like that. It's something I miss about those streaming services because it is a way to have people connect with your music more. But at the same time, he's also just very much pointing to a change in the landscape of music consumption. In a video about lazy musicianship, which is implying that, like, musicians are at fault for not having back covers on Spotify, even though that's a flaw of the system itself, not the musicians. Like, I make back covers, I just can't upload them there. It's not a feature. That's not my fault as an independent musician. He has good points once again, but it's clear that he's trying to place them in this, like, nostalgic context of, like, oh, back then musicians actually did this stuff. And he very deliberately seems to blame it on these small independent musicians, instead of on the streaming services that have shaped the landscape of music consumption directly. Like, I don't have influence over that. That's not my fault. And his whole view on music consumption becomes a lot more clear when you hear him say the following.
These things meant something.
What, do those things not mean something now? Like, I'd argue that there's absolutely people who are very obsessed with music and the work that goes into it. I see, like, people, like, posting Rate Your Music stuff where people, like, catalog all the recording personnel and vocalists and everything that goes into a song, but also just review them and put genre tags on it. Like, they make a conscious effort to engage with that music in a very analytical way. Or, like, Last FM, where people detail their entire music listening history and comment on each other's listens and stuff like that. Or like music boards or like Reddit or like independent music reviews and websites and or Bandcamp review. They're like, people still do this stuff.
What I'm saying is...
What he's saying is that he has a very big indoor gym in his house and you don't.
That music has basically become valueless. If you only have to pay $10.99 a month to have access to anything.
Well, did you know there's like actually options to pay more than that for music? You can like go to the record store. Those are still a thing, Rick. And then you can like buy vinyl, which has been booming for like the past decade or so. Or like cassettes are making a comeback too. Those are getting very popular. I literally run a cassette label. We sell out like almost every release because people love that shit. But even outside of that, you can still buy CDs and then rip them or like have like digital downloads of music albums and still listen to them in full. I mean, there's people who are literally putting those albums they ripped onto their phone so they can listen to it on the go. But even then, there's even did you know there's like iPod modding? That's a huge thing now. Like people are modding like old iPods and then putting like new hard drives in them so they can listen to even more music on the go and in better quality than on their phone because they like engaging with music in a very high quality way like that. Like did you know about any of this stuff?
So try this. Try to sit down a couple times a week, play just a few songs. Don't look at your phone, or as I call it, the thought deletion device, because it empties your mind. Let it flow over you. Think about the lyrics, think about the melody, and try to experience music like you used to.
Hey, listen to some albums. Like, pay attention to the lyrics and the musicianship on them. Like good advice.
Or if you're young, try to experience music in the way that we used to.
It feels like every single take in this video is mostly just engineered to sound like something that appeals to like the whole return crowd. Like, oh, we have to go back to our old values and stuff, instead of actually paying attention to what's factual. Like, I have my issues with the TikTokification of music and stuff like that, and how Spotify like refuses to pay artists a living wage, even though it's using their content to gain profit. I think if you start to like arrive at these very conservative, oh, back in my day, oh, the kids these days kind of takes on how music is being consumed these days, are either just very misinformed and should not be running a YouTube channel with over 4 million subscribers talking about the music industry, or you're just intentionally taking all these facts and framing it in a way that appeals to a very specific conservative crowd. There's like several parts in this video, several of these tiny parts that are very agreeable on their own, but then they're used in this wider context of, oh, lazy musicians are ruining everything. He takes a few shots at like music streaming platforms, but even then he's still framing it in a way where the smaller musicians almost seem complicit in the mistreatment and the terrible actions of these streaming platforms. Like, I'm not gonna vouch for Spotify or some big record label here. I just think this is a very classic conservative tactic of blaming a smaller group instead of actually facing the facts. Like, oh, these Mexicans are stealing your job and the liberal Democrat establishment supports it. Oh no. Versus like, oh no, these trap musicians are filling Spotify up with crap and Spotify is supporting it. Oh no. Like, there's similarities here. Like, a lot of them. I find it very hard to take this video seriously when it mostly feels like the deliberate sanding down of takes that could have been good, just in favor of like fitting the mold of conservative politics to appeal to like a very specific audience of YouTube viewers. Especially when so many facts in this video are just straight up false. You can just talk to any musician and realize that it's not at all what he's saying. So yeah, you probably didn't need a 27-minute long video of someone telling you Rick Beato is a bad YouTuber, because that was kind of widely known already, but I don't know, I felt like making it. Thank you for watching.